Hello students, and welcome to another episode of Story Time with Mr. Ritter. In today's story, I'm going to continue the story that I began reading yesterday. It is a story called Benjamin's Box. It was written by Melody Carlson and illustrated by Jack Stockman. It works in coordination with Resurrection Eggs, which you may have seen before. I'm going to show you the egg that corresponds to the part of the story. When I left off in part 1, Jesus had been, a crown of thorns had been placed on his head and he was beaten. And now we continue from there. Benjamin's Box. "Benjamin," called Eli, "have you heard? Jesus is to be crucified." "No," cried Benjamin, "he's done nothing to deserve that." Eli frowned. "My father says that only the worst criminals are put to death on a cross." Benjamin went inside and sat in a dark corner of his house. He did not want to talk or even to think about this sad news. But in his mind, he could still see the evil men hurting Jesus. "I must go," he finally said aloud. "If this is partly my fault, I can at least be there. I can pray for him." "Where are you going?" asked his mother as he opened the door. "To help a friend," he said. She nodded and touched his cheek. As Benjamin climbed the hill, he found a large spike. It was like those used by Romans to nail criminals to crosses. He tucked it in his tunic and continued on. 3 crosses stood at the top, but he could not force his eyes to look upon his friend. He noticed a small group of people apart from the larger crowd. He knew they were Jesus' dearest friends. He sat near them and bowed to pray, but the only words that came were, "I'm sorry, God. I'm so sorry." Benjamin watched as soldiers gambled for Jesus' clothes. He tried to shut his ears to their cruel remarks. Finally, he forced himself to look up. Benjamin looked into Jesus' eyes and saw such sorrow and pain that it cut to his heart. But he also saw love. And like before, Jesus looked right at Benjamin. Surely this was his way of saying all would be well. Perhaps he would even do a miracle. But instead, the sky turned dark, and Jesus cried out, "Father, into your hands I commit my spirit." The ground shook, and Jesus breathed his last breath. Benjamin was stunned. Jesus was dead. As if in a dream, Benjamin heard the people move about. He saw a soldier pierce his friend's side with a spear. People hurried to take down crosses and bodies before the Sabbath began. Soon they were gone, and he was alone. He picked up a stone the soldiers had gambled with and looked up at the dark sky. Why had God allowed it? Later that night, he opened his treasure box and placed the nail and the gambling stone inside. He looked at his collection. It had seemed so valuable when he believed Jesus was the king. But now the strange items only filled him with unbearable sadness. "Benjamin," called Eli the next morning, "come hear the news." Benjamin stuck his head out the window and rubbed his sleepy eyes. "They posted guards at Jesus' tomb," explained Eli. Some say that Jesus will return to life. Benjamin perked up. My grandfather told me that Jesus brought some people back from the dead. Maybe it will happen again, said Eli. But the soldiers say they're making sure people don't steal the body. Quickly, Benjamin dressed and raced to the tomb. Could it be? Could Jesus have returned to life? How he hoped so. But the huge stone remained in place, and the guards blocked the tomb. With dark, scowling faces, they told him to leave at once. As Benjamin walked slowly down the hill, he noticed a bit of white cloth hanging from a small branch. He plucked it off and rubbed it between his fingers. His parents wove cloth like this for burials. Jesus is dead, he told himself as he continued toward home. That night, he sadly placed the cloth in his box. This would surely be the last thing to remember his friend by. He tried to pray, but no words came. He wondered if God even listened. Early the next morning, Benjamin went to the market for his mother. He used to enjoy the crowds in the city, but now they only reminded him of how everyone had turned against Jesus. He shuffled along without looking up. It's a miracle, shrieked a girl. Benjamin stopped in his tracks and listened. Jesus has risen from the dead. The stone's been moved. Benjamin turned and ran from the market and up toward the tomb. Could it possibly be true? Could Jesus have risen from the grave? In his heart, he believed it could be. It must be. He ran even faster. Sure enough, the stone was rolled away. He fell to his knees and thanked God. When he stood, he picked up a sharp piece of broken rock and must have crumbled from that huge stone. With a joyful heart, he marched back down to town. Jesus was alive. In the market, he met a woman who was a friend of Jesus. I know the good news, he said. Jesus is alive. Yes, she smiled. It's as the prophet said. On the third day, he'll rise. Some of us have even seen him. Benjamin ran home and told his parents. He placed the stone in the box. What a treasure he had now. During the next few days, Benjamin and Eli listened as the disciples shared about how Jesus had appeared to them in various places. Jesus said that all this came to pass just so forgiveness could be preached to all nations, beginning right here in Jerusalem, explained a disciple. He said that since we saw all these things, now we can go out to tell others the good news of his forgiveness. Benjamin smiled. Now he understood that Jesus had forgiven him too, and he wanted to share the good news. He ran home and got his treasure box and went out into the streets and gathered all of his friends. Inside this box, he explained, is a great treasure. The children drew closer and listened with excitement. One by one, Benjamin took out each item. He explained how he got it and what it all meant. And so you see, he said as he closed the box and looked into their faces, the treasure is really Jesus. Because of what Jesus did on the cross, we can all be forgiven by God the Father. They all cheered and begged him to tell the story again. That night, Benjamin opened his box one more time before he went to bed. He examined each item, handling them all with love and care. Finally, he placed the last one back in the box. Then he knelt and prayed. Dear God, thank you for letting me find all these special treasures, but most of all, I thank you for sending me the greatest treasure of all. Thank you for sending Jesus, and help me to be a good servant for Jesus. Help me to tell everyone I know about the good news. Amen. Thanks for listening to my story, students. I hope that each of you has found the good news of Jesus. If you haven't, talk to your parents and ask them how you can find the treasure that is Jesus. Have a great day, everybody. You can do this. Go for it.